you on your cell phone while you lecture. You have to know where your craft is going or you're going to crash, right? So I believe the Montauk chair emerged in the extraterrestrial context where the pilot of the ship sits there in this apparatus and thinks where the ship should go, where the time ship should go, not the spaceship. And let me describe the Montauk chair. It's basically a comfortable, recumbent chair like you would encounter in a dental office. There's an umbrella above your head, like a photographer's umbrella. There's a solenoid, a big circular electromagnetic device on the back of the chair. And then there's some sort of cathode ray tube that comes up and is directed at your face. We would have an earphone headset and diodes placed over our eyes. And when the probe to the future began, we would hear this set of syncopated sound tones. It was very sort of musical and kind of like a PBX or a fax squall, but a little bit sort of prettier than that. And we would have this apparently random flashing of different colored lights directed at our eyes from behind a cotton mask that was placed over our eyes. And after about 30 seconds of hearing that sound and of seeing the flashing lights, we would go out of body and we would find ourselves moving rapidly forward, and we'd see something on the horizon, and then we would collide with it and find ourselves in a moment of our own subjective future. So the Montauk chair basically is a magnetic transducer that enables somebody to visit a subjective moment of their actual future, not seeing themselves live it, but as they live it. Like, I'm living this now. I'm not seeing myself give this talk. I'm giving it. So when we would visit the future by the Montauk chair, we would be there in our shoes in real time. I remember one time I went forward in time and I was in my house with my wife and she said, "What's wrong, honey? You seem kind of peaked." And I said, "I don't know. I think maybe I'm falling ill." She said, "Well, why don't you just lay down and take a rest here on the couch?" And I did, and then I woke up in the Montauk chair as a 9-year-old in Morris Plains, New Jersey. I remember another time I was walking back to the Learning Lab from the room where the Montauk chairs were located. There's not just one chair, it's a device, there were multiple chairs. And I was walking along with one of my peers in the program who went on to become an MD, PhD at the University of Virginia, David. And he said, and I always think of those cartoons by William Hamilton in the New Yorker. He said, we were walking along down the hall, and he said, "So who are you this time?" And I said, "I was a lawyer in Seattle." So at that time, I had no family members or even neighbors who were attorneys. My Uncle Ed was living in Santa Barbara, California. I had been past Philadelphia unconventionally via teleportation, but I had never traveled conventionally beyond Philadelphia. In fact, this is my second day here ever visiting Philadelphia. And so yet, as a New Jersey school child, I saw myself practicing law in Washington State, which I've now been doing since 1996. So clearly the future I visited on that particular probe was my actual future, or some very close semblance of it. The fourth type of time travel that was developed by DARPA by 1970, in fact, it existed for many years before that, for decades before that, is the chronovisor. The devices that Dan Burrish in his Project Camelot testimony refers to as looking glass technology. The derivation of the chronovisors was not extraterrestrial. It was an accidental discovery made by two Vatican priests named Pellegrino Ernetti and his colleague Pierre Maria Gemelli. In the 1940s at the Catholic University of Milan, let me just mention the Catholic connection because Roman Catholicism came up at this conference. The faction of the CIA that was developing this time travel capability for the U.S. government had not only been instructed by the Vatican to develop these time travel technologies, but it was the Catholic faction within CIA. My father and many of the other project principals were devout Roman Catholics. I think you could even say some of them were sort of knights of the Catholic Church. So I have to be true to the historical record and say that Project Pegasus was a Catholic project inside of DARPA. But Ernetti and Gemelli were studying the Gregorian Gregorian chants to try to determine how they have special properties, like healing properties. And they were working on a specialized microphone to split the signal of the voices in the chants. And to their astonishment, something that Gemelli's father had said to him in childhood came through the microphone. And then working with the distinguished Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, by 1952 they had a device that would render a two-dimensional image of a past event, including, Ernetti would claim, up to the time of his death in 1994, moving images of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, I can verify that such images have been retrieved by the U.S. government, because in 1972 at the Sandia National Labs, I was invited to view about a 20-minute black and white documentary film that depicted the crucifixion, and it was very close to the account in the New Testament, or accounts in the New Testament of Jesus' death. They later, sometime between 1952, when they still had this two-dimensional flat-screen technology like a television set, in the early 70s, apparently with the involvement of Bell Labs of Murray Hill, New Jersey, which was about 15 minutes from our house, they had found a way to drive an